Welcome to Matrix Tech Talk.
In this episode, the CEO of Kugler talks about how servant leadership was the key to his success. In this episode, I'm super excited to have the CEO and the named partner of Kugler company, Bonifaz Maag. Bonifaz, welcome to Matrix.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Awesome. So, Bonifaz, I'm really excited that you have built a company that is a well-known brand in automotive industry. I serve in the automotive industry as an engineering service company. Your company is a consulting company, and almost all my clients are aware of you. They are consulted by you. So my first question would be, how did your entrepreneurship journey get started? What motivated you, and how did you build such a brand name?
Oh, well, first of all, I guess we are in the automotive industry since quite a while, and we were there when the whole thing with regard to automotive electronics started, when it became an important topic for the OEMs and the tier ones. That was back in 2000, and at that point we were part of a different company called Qlabs, which was a subsidiary of Ericsson. And in 2004, there was a strategy change there. So in the essence, the result of that was that we founded our own company with focus on what we did before, process improvement. We were passionate about that. We still thought there is a big need in the automotive industry to support the industry with regard to, let's say, process structure, process discipline. And as we see today, that need grew. So essentially, in other words, right now, everybody or anybody, any organization in the automotive industry really focuses on process worldwide. That starts in at the very east in Japan and China, and it ends up at the West Coast in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, or other companies in California. So in between, everybody who deals really with, let's say, more advanced electronics in the automotive industry somehow has to deal with the challenge of software and process. And that brings us across the world, essentially.
Fascinating. When was your company formed?
Let's say, legal start date was August 2004. Mm-hmm. So back then, Hans-Jürgen and I, so Hans-Jürgen Kugler and myself, did start the company. And in November, a couple of other people joined. So that was the time when we did start this company.
And how many partners do you have now?
Right now we are 16 people who own the company, and there will be a couple more because some people leave because of retirement. Other people take on the shares of these guys, and therefore there's a constant, let's say, change in ownership. But the idea is really that the main owner, the main shareholder of the company should be employees. That's not really a dogma anymore, but the idea is that the employees who work at the company own the company.
That's fascinating. So when you started this company back then, did you face any difficulties to gain some traction, gain some market share? What was the hurdle that you faced, and how did you overcome it?
Well, in fact, I'm still full in respect of anybody who starts a company without, let's say, an initial wave of customers. And we were in the lucky situation that there were a couple of customers. We had customers already from the very beginning because, as I mentioned before, there was a company we worked with before. So when we did split off from Qlabs, there were a couple of clients, BMW, Bosch, Volkswagen, Harman, that were clients for us as well, and that gave us a good head start. So our start wasn't really that difficult from that perspective. What was definitely kind of a difficult thing was to manage cash flow, to manage growth in the initial years. But aside that, we had a nice setup for a start.
Fascinating. So how big is the company? How many employees do you have right now?
Right now, about 85 worldwide.
85.
So we have a subsidiary in the US, we have a couple of people in Poland, and the main group of people is in Germany.
Fascinating. So if I ask you, so because I want to learn so much from you, I have a lot of respect for you that you've been, built such a company. So I want to learn from you. If I ask you, so what was the factor you think that played role that you built a brand? You not only built a company, you built a brand.
Well, it's probably, or at least I hope, I cannot confirm because that's up to the customers, but what we usually strive for is really that we try hard and implement, let's say, successfully good projects. That doesn't work always, but that's always what we strive for. Essentially, so we run the conferences, Agile conference, we did start the Spice Days, which is now VDASys. So these are things where we try to give back to the industry. That's for us an important aspect. We always also think or try to think ahead, what's next, what's around the corner, what is the next challenge, just to be ready and to give, let's say, ideas to the industry when it's time for that. So this is how we try to run our business. We invest a lot in knowledge management, in training, in education of people. We also talk a lot to people. We try to understand people in the industry. We try to understand what their direction of thinking is, what challenges they see for the future, and that's how we want to shape and contribute.
Fascinating. So as the CEO of a company, it's like I run a company too, and it's you have to hop between a lot of context. Context switching is really the name of the game. So if in a plane someone asks me, what do you do for a living? I usually start with, well, I do firefighting. Because when things escalates to me, it means like 50 other people can solve the problem, right?
Yep.
So I guess this is the same for you. You are not only the named partner, you're the CEO, the man in charge. Yeah. How do you handle that?
Well, first of all, we have now 14 years of history, and that with that also came quite some, let's say, structure and organization. So there are quite a couple of people and very good people in places that take care for a lot of the business stuff. So for instance, sales is with one of our guys, Steffen Hermann, a couple of other guys, and they deal with all these questions. And a couple more people deal with a couple more things. So in the end of the day, there isn't too much day-to-day business that really escalates to me. Most of the things are really dealt with by very competent and good people. So in essence, for me, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel super, let's say, stressful or that I'm involved in day-to-day business too much. I really can focus on strategy and development of the company, on, let's say, specific client engagements that maybe nobody else wants to deal with or can deal with. It's also a bit about, let's say, servant leadership in a certain way from all our colleagues. So in that regard, it's not really that dramatic for me.
So. I love that. So tell us a little bit about your leadership trait, the term that you mentioned, servant leadership. So how do you manage that?
Well, in the end of the day, and if I say servant leadership, that's not just me, that's all of the people who have kind of a, let's say, management role. First of all, we are a network organization. We do not have big hierarchies and strong hierarchies. We are an organization where people take on roles and they can give back the role at a certain point in time when they say, hey, I had enough of that role right now, I would focus on something else. We find somebody else who wants to take on the role. And also with roles usually do not really come big things in terms of compensation. For sure, if you have to take a certain personal risk, then there's also a kind of compensation for that. But for instance, when we think about HR, the so-called operating manager who have kind of a responsibility for certain people, they are regular consultants and they take on that role and they support the other consultants by doing this job. And at one point in time they may say, okay, I have enough of being an operating manager, maybe somebody else wants to take on, and they are usually young people who want to have that on their CV and take on such a role, and then they take on. So it's kind of a You support the company by taking on roles, or an expert area manager who runs a certain focus area like Agile, organizes that, represents KMC to the outside world with regard to such an specific activity, or to work in an industry working group, VDA or ZVEI and other industry working groups. These are usually tasks people take on because they like to do it, and by that they support and serve the company. There are other roles that are a bit more, let's say, time intensive, and these are then dedicated roles, like for instance sales. But still, the important thing about sales is to support the company with regard to a nice process, to make it easy for the people to contribute to sales and to close projects and these kind of things.
So you have now a team that you can rely on. So you
Absolutely.
You know, not everything gets escalated to you. So
Absolutely.
Was it like this in the beginning also, or was there a time where you had to really give a lot?
Well, in the very beginning, when we were 15, 20, maybe 30 people, yes, there was much more that got delegated or escalated to me. But still, it's a very, let's say, startup phase back then, and people really worked long hours to make things happen. So even then, it didn't feel like escalation, or it didn't feel like something very distinct and specific only I can do. It was more kind of a thing, okay, I had some capacity so I could take on the task, and therefore I did it. And many other people did it the same way. So if there's a task, if there's something that needs to be done, there's usually someone in the organization who says, hey, I volunteer, I want to do it. And that's something that makes it easy for a company to deal, especially with the very dynamic phase during the startup time. But right now, things are a bit more settled. We have a clear structure with regard to roles and the associated tasks, and therefore things calm down a bit. We know how to change that structure if we need to change it, which roles we have, what certain roles brings in terms of responsibilities, and therefore things are a bit more calmed down right now.
Fascinating. So yeah, so your team structure is more dynamic, that people take volunteer to take responsibility, and that is the key for your growth, your success.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely. And by that we can scale as well.
What is your vision? What do you want to achieve? What is the vision of your company that you want to achieve in 10 years, in the long run, maybe?
Oh, that's a quite good question with regards to vision. First of all, some companies have a vision statement and a mission statement, and we don't have that. We had something in the past, and this is kind of still valid, but that's more focused on the technical side of things. However, what we have is a so-called leitmotif, and that's probably the very first thing I discuss with any new employee of KMC. The leitmotif really balances or puts three different perspectives into context and puts them or sets them in relationship. The first thing is for the customer. What do we want to achieve for the customer? Obviously, we all have customers, and therefore they play an important role for an organization. And what we do for the customer, what we want to do for the customers, is to support them, to help them with regard of their improvement programs. Whatever kind that is, that could be more on the technical side with, let's say, functional safety or cybersecurity. That could be a restructuring engagement with regard to reorganize to a certain future direction. We had that in the past a couple of times with autonomous drive, with connected services and such kind of things. So to run such improvement programs, to design them, to help the customers to successfully implement them, that's what we want to do for the customers. And this will stay the same in 10 years. The topics may change, maybe then it's no longer agile, maybe it's something different. In the very beginning it was CMMI, but CMMI is no longer there. So that the topics may change, but the subject as such for the customer, the service we provide, that probably stays the same. The second thing is for the company, so definitely sustainable business is an important thing for us. It's not about the, let's say, fast money, it's really about sustainable business, customer relationship, to really understand the industry, to work for the industry, to support the industry, to really come up with new ideas the industry may embrace or adopt to solve its problems. And the third aspect is the employees. So to really support employees, to help employees to grow in whatever direction. Some people want to go in certain countries, other people want to excel in a technical area, other people may want to do personal things like HR work and such kind of things. So we try to balance these three perspectives. That's for us a key thing, and probably my vision is that in the future we are still able to balance these three needs, always based on the future needs of our customers.
Fascinating. So what advices do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs? From your long background of entrepreneurship and a very successful entrepreneurship.
I guess each and every situation is different, and therefore I wouldn't really replicate what worked for us to others. We had a very specific situation, as I mentioned in the very beginning, with a somehow existing customer base, and that made things a bit easy for us in that regard. Maybe one thing, if I would mention one thing, it's probably the servant leadership thing. That's for me an important aspect. To embrace diversity, to embrace people, to support people in their roles, to not consider the entrepreneur as the center of the organization, but someone who supports all the others. That's what I think is important for future workplaces. And probably that's the only thing I would say. Yeah, consider this if you want to start a company or run a company. It's probably something that is quite important these days.
I fully agree with you. Leadership is the key, and the servant leadership that you mentioned, I fully agree with you on that. So another question, besides being so successful, building a company which is actually dominating in your field, not only in Germany, also outside of Germany, do you have any mistakes in your journey that you've learned from, that you were okay to share with?
First of all, the term dominate is a very strong one. So I would probably say that we have quite good positions in certain of our service areas, as we call them, or expert areas, like for instance automotive spice. But in other areas, there are a lot of companies out there that have a very good position as well. So, for us, it's always to think about the next step. So what's beyond the corner? What's around the corner? So if I think, for instance, about automotive spice is one area which is a big part of our business right now. But it was quite important for us back in 2010 to think about the next step, because it was quite obvious A-Spice won't serve everything and won't support or answer any question that comes up. And therefore there are other things that are required, like for instance agile, or now cybersecurity and other kind of things. And to understand the industry, to see where the industry is going, that's probably one thing we consider as important to build our future, if this is the direction you're shooting for.
Yeah, that's really important. If you have made any decision that you would make, in a different way, we all make mistakes as an entrepreneur. Is there any, like Jack Ma said, don't learn from people's success, learn from people's mistake. Yeah. So my question was, if there is any such thing that you are open to share with the audience.
Well, probably the thing I learned is that if you do a mistake, don't try to hide it. Make it public, disclose it, deal with it, change it, and improve from there. That's for me an important aspect. And there were things we tried in our organization that didn't really work well. We had investments in strategy or in certain directions that didn't really pay out, and that's important that you accept that, because in the end of the day, For me, strategy is also about to fail. Not every step is really, or not everything you do in that regard is the right thing. And therefore, sometimes you fail. So to accept that, to change it, and to do the next attempt, that's quite important for us.
Fascinating. All right. Thank you, Bonifaz, so much. It was really interesting having the discussion with you. I was really, really fascinated. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for watching. Please tell us if you agreed, disagreed with the discussion we had. Write comments below if you want to participate in our podcast by asking a question. Write to me or direct message me in LinkedIn, Zing, or Facebook, wherever you want to, or send an email to podcast@matrix.de. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next episode.
In this podcast show, we bring in the industry leaders and experts in the automotive domain to share their experiences along their journey. The mission of our podcast is to start a dialogue that will allow us to understand the development of automotive industry and where the automotive industry is going. You can ask questions to our guests directly. Just send us an email to podcast@matrix.de. We'll schedule a call with you during the recording and you'll be part of our show. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any new episodes. Please share this video to help others get enlightened as well, and that would mean a great deal to us.